Hi there. Today we're going to establish the context, audience and purpose for Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech, which was delivered in 1963. You may like to complete your analysis table while you're watching the video. So Martin Luther King was an American Baptist minister who is best known for his role in the advancement of the civil rights movement. He became the leading force in the fight for civil rights and based his activism on his Christian beliefs and was inspired by the non-violent activism of Mahatma Gandhi. His famous I Have a Dream speech was delivered at the 1963 March for Washington, in which he called for an end to racism. The purpose of the whole march and his speech was to advocate for civil and economic rights for the African American people. King was the recipient of the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964 for combating racial inequality through non-violent resistance. Martin Luther King died in 1968 when he was assassinated. So the historical context for the speech, it's good to understand what was happening at the time. So stemming on from our study of Wilberforce's abolishment of slavery, African American people were not treated equally. So even though slavery was abolished a long time ago before all of this happened, they were still not accepted in society as equal. So they were treated as an inferior race, and racism was a prominent issue during this part of history, not just in America, but in other areas as well. Racial discrimination was deeply embedded in American society, and segregation was a way of life for the African American people. The reality for them was inequities in housing, employment, education, medical services, and public accommodation. They were denied the right to vote and faced great injustices within the legal system. Many lived in poverty due to the white landlords refusing to rent to them, and it was rare for them to be able to find what they would call a good job due to having to attend separate inferior schools and not being able to go to school with white children. And many didn't have the knowledge in order to gain a high-paying job, and people didn't want to employ them. Segregation laws and way of life included the denial of admittance to public facilities such as hospitals, restaurants, theatres, parks, motels, and African American people were even denied the use of public toilets, and many were signed with for whites only. Servants were not allowed to share the same toilet as the white household members, and would have to use a separate outhouse, which was usually out the back and not of a very sanitary standard. If establishments had to be shared, so things like public transport, the African American people, it was regulated by law for them to have to sit at the back or give up their seat to a white person if the bus was full and a white person came on board. They were also segregated in public places like courthouses and theatres, and they had to sit in a separate balcony so that they weren't integrated with the white people, and they had to sit with their kind. So it was all of these kind of things, and you can see some of these signs here that confirm this, that was the drive behind the civil rights movement. So Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech was first delivered by King at the 1963 March on Washington, which was organised to advocate for civil and economic rights for the African American people. So it was specifically devoted to that. His 17-minute speech called for an end to racism and equality and civil rights for his people. The march, and especially King's speech, helped put civil rights at the top of the agenda of reformers in the United States, and it facilitated the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. The speech was delivered to an audience of millions. More than 250,000 people were at Lincoln Memorial to watch it live, and that was of a diverse ethnic range of people. And it was also televised live to an audience of millions, where his message would have been sent to many anti-civil rights supporters as well. So now that you have a context and this knowledge in mind, you need to go and read the I Have a Dream speech. You could watch it if you want as well. After reading, you need to identify some of the key devices that are listed here, but also any others that you might find yourself. Remember, you've got that list in your booklet to refer to. It's important not to only annotate the devices used, but to clarify unfamiliar vocabulary and also just make notes of the points that he's making and maybe the context that it's referring to in the speech. So bring your speech to class annotated for discussion, and then we can deconstruct as a class. See you there.